Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Global Chamber Young Global Leaders event. I think it's the first one this year. Doug, thank you for having us here. And I have my lovely co-moderator. My name is Susana Trasente. I work for the Peoria.
My name is Kamilia. I'm an intern at Global Chamber and a second year student at Thunderbird. My focus is marketing, and I'm just glad that you all were able to make it today.
Virtually, can everybody hear us okay? Alina, do you want to give us a thumbs up?
A little higher.
Okay. We'll start with our speakers. Dr. Brett, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Dr. Brett Mcmickel. I'm president and CEO of Circlio. We're in aerospace and autonomy. Formerly, I was president and CEO of Ag Junction until it was acquired in December of 2021. And before that, I was in the aerospace at Honeywell. Graduate of Thunderbird, an EMBA program, and PhD at Notre Dame, and my undergraduates at the University of Utah.
Yay, go Utes.
We always seem to have sort of Utah tie, huh? Caitlin, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Caitlin Balderrama. I'm the branch manager for Arizona for Mainfreight, which is a global supply chain company. We do ocean and air import and export. I'm a licensed customs broker. I worked at Thunderbird actually 10, 12 years ago in the recruiting team. So I'm very familiar with the school when it was over in Glendale. Great to see how much this was, how far it's come, and new students. And I had a roundabout career path. I went to Trinity College in Ireland and did my full 3-year degree there because I did 1 year over in Russia. So I studied in Moscow and majored in Russian. And but after college, I took a 1-way ticket down to Venezuela and back around before getting a job in business. And now I'm managing an international air and ocean, export tourism brand. So I understand that sometimes careers aren't just a straight line. I'm excited to be here.
I have to say that I concur with you quite a bit. So great to see you here. Alina, do you want to go ahead and say a few words about yourself?
Use to raise our voices a bit. They can barely hear us on Zoom. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Alina Morse. I'm the 17-year-old CEO and founder of Zolli Candy. Zolli Candy is all natural, sugar-free candy that actually cleans your teeth. We've been selling for nearly 7 years, and we're in about 2,100 retailers in the US, as well as over 9 countries aside from the US. So we're a globally growing business, started from Detroit, Michigan. And not only a woman and teen-owned business, but a family-owned business. We also have a nonprofit where we give free Zolli candy to schools across America to teach kids about the importance of oral health care and entrepreneurship, and just always look for ways to give back and keep people smiling. That's a little bit about me.
Thank you. Shalom, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so my name is Shalom Bako, and I am the managing director of a company called Afrivana. We started in West Africa, and we're primarily into international trade and distribution of African agriculture. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. So before we get started, this is going to be just a very interactive session. We really kind of want to hear from you guys. We have these great panelists here, and I mean, what a great time to really come in and talk to people that have been in the field, been in your shoes, who have traveled the world and seen and done a lot. So Kamilia and I are going to start with just a couple questions. We'll open it up to you guys, and then virtually we'll go ahead and break out into 2 sessions. But Kamilia and I will get started on a couple questions that we have for you guys. One of them, and I think this one was a very interesting one that we had, is what risks or chances have you taken in your career that have allowed you to do what you wanted to do? Caitlin, I'll start off with you.
I mean, one risk was certainly majoring in European studies and then taking that one-way flight down to Venezuela to learn about South America after university. And you look for opportunities. My opportunity was becoming a travel writer and then growing to manage the office for Machu Picchu for an international travel agency that were down there. So, sure. So I would just say that take opportunities where you see them. Think about what it is that's really important to you, even at a young age. You might not have a clear picture exactly of where your career is going to go, but if it's the right opportunity for you to take that step, whether it's sideways or a little bit off to left field, go for it. And it can help you grow. And even if it doesn't grow you in terms of those skills you can put on a resume, it might let you grow as a person and really develop those skills for knowing who you are as a person, and then also just strength and integrity, really.
Brett, you want-
I agree with the taking the chance and the opportunity. In terms of the risks that I've taken, so my career path was a little bit, it definitely wasn't what I had planned. So I went to Notre Dame to get my PhD with the full intention of going into academia. I wanted to go solve challenging problems, and I thought that the academia would be the place to do it. And at the end of my PhD, I had the opportunity to work with Honeywell in industry, and saw that just solving the academic problem was only a portion of solving and actually implementing for good. And so that chance I took was switching my entire career trajectory and going into industry. And so I took that leap. And so I guess that, looking back, it's that having an idea of what I wanted to do. I definitely wanted to solve challenging problems, but not being tied to too rigidly to how I was going to go about it, and taking that opportunity, that chance when it presented itself. Because even when I went into industry, it was under research, and it's like, okay, well, I'll go solve the problems then on industry, and then of course that'll go and affect the world. And then I found, wow, you know what? Solving and creating a product is only one small portion. And then it was that taking the next step. And honestly, I would say the hardest step that I ever took was moving from an individual contributor into a management role. And for me, that was really, really tough. You're the subject matter expert, and then relying and managing people and not knowing everything was a big step. And so that was another risk. And then, continuing on with that and then moving up into business was, it was a complete pivot. So then I moved completely away from research and into the business side and took that risk.
That's awesome to hear, just because you have, you never know what's going to happen. And that's amazing to hear that both of you were able to do that and have definitely grown from that. And you see that prosperous feeling and ability to continue to grow. So Alina, I know you are 17 years old, but I'm still asking you that question.
Sure. If not for taking risks and not for pushing the boundaries, I never would have created something that never existed previously. It was a very outlandish dream: candy that cleans your teeth, candy that's good for you, candy that, adults won't frown upon giving to their kids, but something that still tastes great. And it was definitely a left field dream, but with asking the right questions and finding the right people, and working towards, our goal with a positive attitude really made all the difference. And really, really utilizing the skills that we had, which was each other. My family hadn't worked in dentistry and hadn't worked in, making candy or too deeply in consumer packaged goods at all. So we were going about this journey together, and it was just about relying on each other's previous knowledge, and the want to keep learning, and the curiosity and the tenacity. That's what I would say.
Great, thank you. Shalom, how about you?
Well, yeah, I've taken a lot of risks, and they're just a natural part of, I'd say, business. And so over the years, I'd say that one of the early risks I took were shortly after college. I was more into the professional sports world of soccer, and early on, the risk was leaving a professional soccer career to move back to West Africa. And to a lot of people, that sounded crazy, being that I had the opportunity to go to the United States, get an education, work hard to get into this professional space, and then to leave it to go back to Africa to say that's where I wanted to focus at a young age at 21, 22. That was some of my early risks that I took. And over the years, I would say some of the bigger risks I took, such as 4 or 5 years ago, I decided to go to Mexico and move there. I bought a one-way ticket, similar to the lady sitting there. I took a risk like that, and it ended up being the best decision I made for my business at the time. So I'd say the risks, some work out, some don't, but overall, I'd say some of the bigger risks I took, I'm enjoying the benefits of them 10 years later. So those are some of the risks I took.
That's great. I feel like this one-way trip thing is a consistent theme here. But I'll keep it with you, Shalom and Alina. What resources do you think have been in place, either for small businesses or entrepreneurs that really have helped you be successful?
I would say tools like LinkedIn have been the most important or the most crucial to success. I mean, when it comes down to tracking buyers and trying to figure out the email addresses or phone numbers of the important people in whatever field you're in, LinkedIn is a great resource. And it's definitely been something that my team has relied upon to this day to connect with people, and to just maintain those relationships. You can meet somebody once and that's great, but what are you going to get out of that relationship moving forward? What are you going to do to utilize their skill set or their resources in the future, when you could, have them as a contact and help utilize their help. And so just, creating that network and LinkedIn being such a great platform to do so on has been definitely an integral part of growing our company. But really, in terms of small business resources, there's so many grants, statewide, nationally. In Michigan, where I'm from, there's the Michigan Small Business Association, where they have awards and they have all sorts of various literature and programs, even some training sessions and other various resources for small business owners and entrepreneurs. I can't speak to other states, but I'm sure there's programs in place similarly to what I've had here in Michigan. But I also know there's federal programs. The small business, the federal program. I can't think of the name right now. Yes, thank you very much. But there really is a lot of programs in place where entrepreneurs go through a lot, And, there's so many hardships when starting your own company, and starting from the ground up comes with a lot of trials and tribulations. And so there are programs in place that we've definitely taken advantage of as a growing company that have definitely made the process a bit easier. So there are those resources out there, and they're not too hard to find.
Okay, so in my case, well, I'll talk about two sides of resources. Coming from West Africa and Nigeria specifically, some of those resources are quite limited. But one thing I have found that have been huge resources have actually been more of our traditional rulers and systems. And so working with, being born and raised in those communities and having a good understanding of locality. I've spent a lot of time in villages working with farmers, leaders locally. The traditional leaders have been probably the biggest resources in my business, for my business, in terms of production. And then on the other side, in places like the US or the UK, you have a lot of free resources that you can find online and access. And frankly, some of the more, I guess, less institutional resources that have helped are things like YouTube, things like Instagram, things like LinkedIn. Frankly, a lot of people have found me and some of the things that we do via just content. I've been documenting it for a while using platforms like YouTube and social media. And so just posting that over the years, there's been consistency there. And those are some kind of free resources that people have found us through. But LinkedIn has been a huge resource. I just scour the internet for platforms to use. And so, yeah, I'd say those are a few, both free and others that you have to research.
That's great. You always have to say how technology really brings us together, and that's a great example of that. So thank you for that. Dr. Brett, Caitlin, I'll bring it back to you guys. You've had this vast global experience throughout your career and throughout your life. How has it helped you define your everyday work? What do you think would really would be a good highlight of that?
The global mindset definitely opens your eyes to new opportunities. And that's what I love the most. And that's what I actually miss the most when we stop traveling, is just experiencing different ways to do things really helps with the creativity. You get to see how other cultures might solve a problem and go, hey, you know what? This would work to go solve this other problem, or maybe we could go and help. Maybe there's an area where you can cross the cultures, and there's so much opportunity there. Looking globally, and then using global resources, because the potential of people to solve problems is amazing, and it's just really fine. If you've got a problem, somebody out there's got a solution. It's just finding them, and so that's amazing to be able to travel and experience. The other one is just understanding the vastness of the market, right? I mean, the potential to sell product globally. From an Ag Junction standpoint, a lot of our sales, over half of our sales, were outside the US. So without the global market, it would have been a really small company.
I think that the global perspective has teaches you how to be better at communication, which is so important, and empathy, because English is my first language, but I'm emailing with somebody who English could be their third language, and we're trying to solve supply chain problems to get their product from A to B. And so it gives me a lot of empathy to understand that they're working just as hard as me, and we do have a common goal that is shared, but we just sometimes go about it a different way. And so it gives a lot of perspective having that global, communication. You learn to be a lot more clear. A lot of my emails are bullet points, because that is how I get my my mentioning across. And very few adjectives, because that's how you can communicate on that global sphere. And then just being resourceful. If you're in your own home country, you kind of know your way around things. But if you are dropped into a country where you've never been before, you really have to, I guess, learn to be resourceful to find solutions to your problems yourself, or to find those people who know those answers. And so that's where the global mindset has really come through for me.
Great answers, yeah. Kamilia, I'll open it up to you. Do we have any questions online or?
Yeah, but this is continue.
Okay.
All right. So.
Yeah. Okay, so just does anybody in the room have a question just before I keep going? Okay, all right. What are some of the challenges of going global? Dr. Brett, seems like that's a good one for you.
Two challenges that I've experienced. So the businesses that I'm in are technical, and understanding technical regulations, like globally, the customs side and just shipping the product there.
Yeah.
But then the regulations on technology are all over the map. And so as you're going into a region, make sure you take time to understand what you need to do to get your product into that country. I can guarantee there's some uniqueness about whatever product you have in mind. The other one's culture, and in a different way is subtle things. I mean, the communication styles between different countries, you've got to be careful on how you approach the conversation and the business, and whether it's a direct style or indirect style. And then, I mean, even in smaller, if you have employees working in different countries, how do you develop the challenge of having a unified corporate culture, but with enough flexibility that there's a uniqueness for the global, all of your global centers. A funny example that I learned the hard way is we have an Australian team, and pumpkin in Australia is different than in the US. And so like pumpkin recipes and carving pumpkins, it was culturally, we had to navigate and try to figure out, okay, what makes sense and how do we have activities and how do we share information in a way that will be inclusive of everyone globally. So in terms of challenges, culture and many different forms of that and communication, as well as the technical challenges.
Caitlin, I'm sure you've seen it all as well. Do you want to say a few words about that?
In terms of global expansion, we help our customers move their cargo overseas. So you have a customer who's never shipped to, I don't know, to Japan. And all of a sudden now they just have a brand new customer who wants something from Japan. And so definitely it is a challenge understanding. And you're right, sometimes wording does have to be very flowery, and very complimentary. And, you need to kind of pick up on those cues and try to mimic how other people are addressing you and address them back the same way. But in terms of going globally, it's just, don't be afraid to ask questions, I guess would be my biggest advice. If, don't assume anything when you're dealing with anybody overseas. Just find the right person to ask to figure out the answers and go from there, because it's going to be a challenge with technology. It's going to be a challenge with food. It's going to be a challenge with all those different rules and regulations, and just be nice about it. And don't be afraid to ask those questions.
Thank you. And speaking of food, you're right. It is quite a challenge when it comes to food and beverage. Alina, Shalom, do you want to say a few words about that?
Sure. So, growing globally has been a huge part of expanding Zolli candy. We're actually the #1 selling sugar-free candy in Asia. And it's a really interesting market because we are so new and definitely a still, mid-size up and coming brand in America. But it's been a great opportunity to grow that market right alongside our American or our US growth, and kind of mirror that in Asia. And we found some really fantastic partners that we wouldn't have been able to do even a fraction of the growth that we've been able to accomplish without these fantastic partners. And what's been really great is I liked what you were talking about previously was, communicating and having sort of that language barrier, which can be tough for sure. It's one of those things where, it's a struggle on both ends. But if both parties are working towards, coming to the same conclusion, coming to the same ideas, it'll end with a great partnership. And we've been really lucky to have some great partners overseas. But, what we've found that's been so interesting is that other countries really are, interested in the American aspect of the product. And so for some of our customers, we'll ship directly our American packaging and our English packaging, and because they are looking for that unique sort of American product in their market. We're able to utilize our marketing materials that we've been that have been shot in the US, and that are in English, and we can dub over them in whatever various language. And so it's been really cool to see kind of an international spin on our marketing materials and our products. And it just wouldn't be possible without our partners overseas. And so I think what you were talking about a little bit, Kaylin, is that, it's finding those people, finding those key partners. And that's definitely what we've tried to accomplish. And the advice that I would give to anybody going to work, especially in CPG overseas, is just finding those key partners. There's a lot of distributors, there's a lot of exporters, importers, and some of them are totally in it just to make money, but some of them are in it to forge a relationship and to really make a great experience for both parties. And those are the people you definitely want to work with, people that want to form that relationship and portray your product in the most positive light that they can, as best that they can, knowing their market and having that expertise. So, we, over the past, 5-ish years that we've been working in shipping internationally, there's been ups and downs with supply chain, but one of the things that's been very constant is our relationships with our partners. And that's definitely a key building block when overcoming supply chain issues, is being able to be in contact and in communication with those key partners. And that way, when the world opens back up again, as we've seen post-pandemic, you're still able to see success in those markets.
I think for me, we started off intentionally knowing that we were going to international business, international trade. And so the approach from the very start was based on my experience. Obviously, coming from West Africa to America, there was already some cross-cultural differences that I saw and really paid attention to years prior to starting the business. So I walked into it intentionally knowing that what the cross-cultural differences are and sort of how we would need to communicate what the product is. So for anyone that's seen my stuff or knows about our business, our primary product is hibiscus. Now, I could say hibiscus to most people in here, and you probably have an idea of what it is, or hibiscus tea. However, in South America, especially in my Mexican market, I have to say Flor de Jamaica, because it's a totally different name, and they wouldn't know it if you said hibiscus. If you go to the Caribbean, and you were talking to anybody from the Caribbean, you would have to say sorrel. So all the same product, locally, we also have a different name for it, right? So it was for me early on, and before we got into it, we just knew that we would have to communicate with all these different markets in not necessarily always a different language, but the product would be known in a different name. And so I was very intentional about that very early on with our core product and our primary product, which is why internationally, like I said, we just went into it intentionally knowing that locally there's a name for it. Internationally, even within close markets like Mexico and America, it would be totally different names. Even within America, even within different communities in America, you would still have to call it 3 different names, sometimes 4, for people to understand it, but still the same product. So those are just a few things that were, at least for us, insights into how we got into the international side. It was very intentional. Our product is very intentional, and the way we communicate is very intentional in terms of the words we use, how we describe it, how we describe how it's used. Sometimes I might talk about hibiscus with cinnamon if I'm speaking more to a Hispanic market. I might talk about hibiscus and pineapple more if I'm talking to a West African community. Or I might just talk about pure hibiscus tea that you get from Starbucks if I'm just talking to someone that I'm not sure, but they're in America. So for us, it's very intentional how we do it and how we go about picking our products, introducing our products, in branding and marketing, all of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That is cultural awareness at its finest. That's a great saying. Thank you for that. Of course.
So, I mean, adding on to the differences in the different cultures on the technology side, not only is it the regulation, but it's a good point about the differences even locally on not only translation. You can't just take a technical manual. So we were in the auto steering business and working with farmers, and you couldn't just take the English manual, translate it into the local language and have it work. Colors means different things. Where the buttons go vary based on the culture. And so it's really about finding that right partner that will help you localize the content in a way that's appropriate for that culture. Otherwise, you're not going to get the product traction. It might actually solve the problem that farmer's needs, but unless you present it in a way that the farmer can understand, they'll just get frustrated. If the button's in the wrong place, so if they read right to left or left to right, they're always going to try to be pushing the button. And if it's in the right place, you're just going to frustrate them. And finally, they're just going to go, forget it. I don't want that product. So if you're looking at going globally, be very intentional, find that partner and work with a local partner to figure out how to do more than translate it, how to actually create the product for that culture.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you very much. Yeah. And we've seen that happen even with global corporations that have been around for such a long time and still struggle sometimes. And I think in the 60s, I think you had the Nova car fail because of that. I remember that was a case study when I was going to school. Yeah. Kamilia, I think we have a couple questions online. Do you want to read those off?
Yeah. Questions here. I'm going to start with Onati. Is that how I pronounce your name? So we have a question, is how have you overcome being young in the business field? For some people, when you're not young, they don't take you as serious as if you were old. So how do you overcome that? Especially, I think this is mainly directed towards Alina here as our young entrepreneur is probably dealing with this. So you could chime in.
For sure. There's a lot of sort of prejudice against inexperience in the business world, and especially in my industry, candy and consumer packaged goods they tend to be, very legacy brand focused. And with these brands that have been around for, tens of hundreds of years, and they've been creating the same products and the same SKUs, and they've been dominating the market, it's tough to be a newcomer it's hard to be a newcomer, and bring kind of a new spin on a product and create something that kind of flips the market on its head, which is, it's definitely tough on its own, but then also adding in the component of being, a teenager and kind of having that sort of prejudice and the stereotype of Gen Z being lazy, or Gen Z, not having the drive or the work ethic to, become well-versed in an industry at a young age, is definitely tough. But I mean, even tying it back into the previous question, it's about finding the right partners. I've been in countless meetings where people have specifically not wanted to, buy product from us or work with us, or, they don't want to talk to me. They want to talk to the adult, or they want to talk to my dad, or, our other team members, because they don't want to work with a child. And, it's just about making the decision to remove ourselves from that situation, because, it really shouldn't be a personal decision. It shouldn't be a choice based on age, or based on gender, or based on any of those stereotypes that come with those features. And we've had to make those decisions, and had to come to the conclusion that not everyone's going to accept that we're a woman-owned, teen-owned business, but the people that do are often the best partners, and are so supportive. And at the end of the day, it definitely makes it worth it, hearing from other kids in the community, or other kids across the world that are inspired to start their own companies, and learn about business, and learn about consumer packaged goods, and learn about becoming an entrepreneur, and are inspired to do so. So that definitely makes it all worth it. But we have definitely faced tons of prejudice and adversity, just simply based on being a young entrepreneur, which I personally think is silly, but people are definitely set in their ways. And there's nothing we can do to change that. We just know that, at the end of the day, we're helping people smile, and working towards our mission, which is, helping kids all over the world.
Thank you, Alina. I must say that's very inspirational. Thank you for that. Shalom, is there something you'd like to add?
Sure thing. I'm young too. So I started pretty young. Like I said, I started at least 21, 22, and it's been an ongoing theme in terms of age, especially where I'm from. A lot of people equate age to wisdom and experience, especially in business. Now, I've been quote unquote hustling since I was probably 6 years old. So for me, in terms of the experience, whether it was 21 to now, certainly have a lot of experience under my belt. But at the end of the day, it comes down to just execution. At some point, the age thing goes out the window, and people have to look at you for what you execute and what you actually do. And so for me, it's been more of a leverage point to just kind of be a little bit under the radar and get things done in a different way. I think in the industry we're in, international trade, especially in agriculture, you're talking about things that people have been used to doing for hundreds of years in the same way. And so coming in with a new perspective, having a international perspective, and trying to bring it to a local mindset, you certainly get a lot of opposition in the beginning. But as time has gone on and people see results, at this point, nobody talks to me about my age anymore. But it definitely has been a challenge over the years, but I've learned how to use it as a point of leverage to know and see things in ways that perhaps other people don't, or the older generation may not. And so that's how I've been able to leverage that. I also have other, I'd say a lot of my board and team and staff are people who are older, and sometimes, just like Alina was pointing out, people want to talk to maybe someone they see as a peer, right? And sometimes you just let it be because it might help move things quicker. But at the end of the day, like I said, I've just found ways to leverage it more than look at it as, a point of difficulty.
That's great. It's always good to know your competitive advantage and use that, especially in business. Would you guys?
Oh, we have some more questions.
Okay, go. Oh, yes, please.
Connie? You can go ahead and ask.
Hello. Yeah, Connie Kadiansky, thank you. You're also fascinating. Knowing that you solve a lot of complex problems, what is a method or tool that you use that's like your go-to when you have a complex problem? And anybody can answer that.
You're the microphone.
Oh, wow. Wow. Complex problem. Guess it depends on the type of problem. I mean, there's some business tools. The one that we use a lot on like process problems is going through the whys and really getting down to the root cause. It's more on solving a situation that's come up. Too often people will scramble, especially if it's a time sensitive, and try to go and solve the immediate problem. But I found that discipline of just taking a little bit more time and asking, well, why did that occur? Well, why did that occur? You're more likely to find that root cause. And there have been several times where you're only seeing maybe a small portion of an underlying problem. And then you realize, oh my gosh, there's something else that we gotta go solve. And it makes a world of difference. Even on like shipping and inventory, you might have let's say an address wrong or something. And then it's like, okay, well, we're just gonna go back and fix that. But if you ask, well, why did that happen? And then you start looking into the ERP, often you'll find it's like, you know what, there's something more fundamental in the process that we gotta go and change. So, I mean, a simple one I'd go with is that 5 whys method, and really taking the time to do correct, really root cause and corrective action.
I think with a complex problem, for me, it helps to ask other people their opinion, even if it's one other person, to be able, I work in an open plan office, and it's huge because if I have something where I'm doubting if I did make the right answer, asking somebody else's opinion is huge. And it's somebody whose opinion you actually trust. And even that can be really helpful to solve the complex problem. Corrective action is also really big because continuous process improvement is huge. You can't keep making the same mistakes over and over. So you fix the problem, and then you need to go back and figure out why the problem happened in the first place. And then that problem's never going to pop up again, fingers crossed. You might have something very similar, but the idea is that you're working backwards and you're solving some of those simple errors that, like an address. Now, you make that correction, it's in the system, people know moving forward, you retrain your team. So fixing those kind of complex problems can be done that way, just by going back. Eventually you are going to have to make a decision. Don't pass off the buck to somebody else to make it. And don't get your, analysis paralysis is a danger that some people can face. And, they came to you to find that solution for a reason, because they trust in you making that decision for them. So eventually you're just going to have to go with your gut or make that decision and learn from it. If it's, always, once you do make that decision to a complex problem, think about it, look back at it, think about if it was the right move and how you might change it moving forward is also what I would advise.
Do you have more questions on that?
So does that answer your question, Connie?
Yes, thank you very much.
Now we have another question from Julia. So Julia, can you please share your question with us?
Hi guys, nice to meet you. Thank you so much. This is honestly so incredible. So my question is really for anybody that's looking after an international team, and that is really, how do you get the most out of your team? So when everybody is spread all around the world, and especially when you're first starting out, how do you get everyone aligned with the vision? As an example, I run a marketing agency and I've really been focused on onboarding. So just really structuring the onboarding process, trying to inspire everyone. But I guess like what kind of advice do you have for someone at that stage of the business?
Sure, culture, company culture plays a role in this. Anybody want to take a stab at it?
I work, my company is global. We're in 26 countries and company culture is huge for it. It's, I think it's always going to be a struggle. You're never going to just have that onboarding, have the person understand the culture and then not have to revisit it often. I will say that some things my company does very well is, try to get people involved in the social media aspect of it. So you do feel like you're all one company, one family. We have newsletters that every single country office has to send out and get to know each other that way, to really inspire us that our coworkers overseas are the same as us. We all do have that same goal and that same vision. It's really important also. Also, sorry, just one thing is the technology aspect. Take advantage of it as much as possible, right? Like always seeing your coworkers with your company overseas, making sure that you're not just talking on the phone.
I mean, if you're just starting out, the new hires are going to be your most critical, and make sure that you hire culture there first, because it's that local presence are going to feed into that local culture. And so if you make the misstep early on, I think it's going to be harder. But I agree in terms of making sure you interact. What I found, the feedback I got at Ag Junction is once we went into COVID, a lot of the international folks actually said that they felt more inclusive because all the meetings, everybody was all of a sudden on equal playing field, is that there weren't side conversations happening over the water cooler. It's all the conversations were happening over Zoom. And so making sure that as you're holding meetings, the international team knows that even if it's like what would have been a side conversation, don't make a decision over the water cooler, make sure that you're inclusive of the entire team. And that's something that I didn't really reflect on. I mean, not to say that I wasn't trying to be inclusive, but once I got the feedback after COVID, I'm like, you know what, there is a lot of conversation in the hallway that we should have brought online and brought in the different teams. The other part is find time to have informal conversations. Too often you just focus on the business and you forget the fact that there are people and you're trying to build a culture. And so create opportunities for the global team to get together. And that's really hard. I mean, we had European, Australian, US. And so if you try to get all of them together, someone's going to have a really bad day. So trying to, separate up, all hands meetings and make it also be aware of the time zone. A lot of people forget. They'll just schedule the meeting and it's like, you know what, I'm going to have the meeting at like 3 p.m. in Arizona with someone in Europe. And it's like, they may accept and they may join. They may not be in the best mood. So just be aware of, when you're calling the meeting, who are you calling it with, and make sure that you, I always try to accommodate their schedule over ours, but if nothing else, rotate it around so that it, if someone has to have an early morning or a late night, it's not the same people over and over again.
Alina, Shalom, is there something you'd like to add?
Well, I would say, working with people internationally and working with people across the country becomes very similar, at least in our eyes. Time differences are for sure a big factor to consider when scheduling Zoom meetings and scheduling check-ins. And when you're outsourcing, work, whether it's a team member that's, working sort of integrated with your local team, or they're doing more freelance work that doesn't necessarily need the attention of all of your other team members. It can really, change the situation. And so I would say, when it's a freelancer or somebody that you're just outsourcing a specific project from, whether it's temporary or long term, but it's more isolated from the rest of the brand. Like I would say social media is a great example of this. You really have them specified on one specific channel, or have them set on one specific project. It's important to have those weekly check-in Zoom meetings or those weekly check-in calls that work on both of your schedules. And then when you're not having those calls, being in communication via email is really important. Because at the end of the day, you're both sacrificing your time to suit the other person's time zone and schedule. And so it's important to be cognizant of that. And without seeing them in the office every day, it's tough to ensure that you're hitting those checkpoints to reach that goal for whatever project or whatever goal you're working towards. You brought that team member on for a reason. And so you want to ensure that there are those checkpoints being hit along the way. And that's why I find that a weekly meeting tends to be the most effective in ensuring that those checkpoints are met and those goals are met in a timely manner. I would say, when you're integrating somebody internationally into your local team, it is super important to, include them in. I like what you said, Doctor, that, those conversations at the water cooler, it's important to bring those into, the whole company culture, and making sure that everyone feels in the loop and included is really key. And so when bringing somebody in internationally or, even across the country, it's definitely tough to create that relationship. But it's really important to, forge those relationships and, make that person feel less isolated from the team, even though geographically they may be. So definitely just trying to be considerate of others and trying to be as communicative as possible ensures that, it not only makes for a successful partnership, but also one that's positive, and they feel, that they're getting something out of it as well.
Yeah, I'd say in my case, it's definitely been an interesting challenge over the last few years, a couple of years. Our business grew, especially during the pandemic, and so I think, frankly, at this point, most of our staff have never actually met in person, mostly virtual, and so those weekly calls are important, and I think that's kind of where and how we've bonded is even through that, knowing that, well, everyone's at different parts of the world, in UK and West Africa and America and Mexico. And so it's kind of become a bonding point, and we sort of make it a point to look forward to something where we'll eventually all meet together. But those weekly meetings are important. Just at this point, we're in a generation where it's just Zoom. Zoom is almost like something. It's almost like a new birthday party. You look forward to going to this weekly Zoom call. So we've just tried to find ways to do that. And like Doctor said, sometimes just having informal stuff, getting to know, people's kids, and sometimes people joining or popping in on Zoom meetings that, but just trying to find ways to, I guess in some ways, just informally get to know each other before actually meeting each other in person, and knowing that, having certain tools that kind of help you work on the projects together, great project management tools are important. And, it's an adjustment for everybody. And as everybody has said, time zones. I think that's probably the biggest thing in our end is it was very early on trying to figure out time zones was a challenge because some people have to wake up at 4 a.m., some people not, and you can't do that every single time. So just making sure that there's equity and representation in terms of respecting everyone's time zones and, different cultural perspectives too. For example, most of the time, if we're having certain calls and most of the people in West Africa, you'll always hear some background noise, right? So you kind of have to just adapt to that. Some people hate that, right? But those are some of the things that you have to understand culturally, maybe different in terms of how people view meetings and how, they cater to all of that. So it's all an adjustment. I think, that onboarding process and having some kind of culture is very important. And in our case, in some ways, just developing a very new culture or integrating cross culture. I think that's a huge part of our culture is understanding that we are very international and cross cultural. So that is a very intentional thing for us to both respect and understand. And it's really for people who appreciate cross-cultural experiences, even if they're not there physically. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Unless you open it up to the room. Yeah.
How are we on time?
Oh, we're going time, 60 minutes.
Okay, all right. Any questions in the room? Oh, go ahead, yeah.
Let's just ask, what was like throughout your business experience, what is something that doing business and being, a leader has taught you about yourself that you didn't know before this experience?
I need to repeat the question
Okay, yeah.
with a microphone. Know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Do you want me to come on? Yeah. Oh, sure.
Hi. So I was just wondering, what is something that you have learned about yourself through your business experience that you did not previously know and now realize about yourself?
Dr. Brett, you're holding the microphone, so I have to do it. Yeah, yeah.
Know about myself. That's a tough question. I think it's difficult. I mean, I was talking to my wife about what advice you'd give myself when I was younger. And if I would have told myself where I was, I would have argued bitterly against it because I was so technical. And so I think what I really learned is I'm a lot more adaptable than I thought. I was very much an introverted engineer in my lab, and going out into the world and being dropped all over has just taught me that, what, I've become and learned through business and working with people that, one is we're a lot more common than anyone ever thinks. And the other part is I'm actually a lot more adaptable than I ever gave myself credit for.
The way I see it, I'm still just at the start of my career. There's still so much more growth and challenges that I want to achieve. But for me, being a leader has really pushed me to, I guess, look inside at those, do I have the right level of patience? Do I have the right listening skills? So it's let me question that and really grow as a person on those skills to make sure that I am the right kind of person that people want to be leading them. And that just will never stop, I guess is the short answer.
That's, I can relate to that. Alina, Shalom.
I would agree that I'm very early on in my career. But from what I've learned thus far, in tough situations, or high pressure situations, I've been able to keep my cool. And it's been a skill that has taken some honing. But for example, my first ever media appearance was on Good Morning America when I was like 9 years old. And it was live TV. It was very intense. It was very high pressure. But I remember just being cool about it. And I think, the anticipation for those moments is often much scarier than the real moment. And I think that goes that principle goes towards a lot of things, whether it's a big presentation with an important client, whether it's an intense meeting with your team, whether it's a big decision you have to make. That principle goes through to a lot of aspects of business and a lot of aspects of life. And it's one of those skills that is definitely not something that just comes naturally to everyone. For me, for sure, it's taken various honing and really making a conscious effort towards maintaining your cool, your composure, and not letting those high pressure situations or those high pressure choices get to you, and trying to take a step back and look for the good, look for the positive, but also look at situations objectively without, too much emotion, and just, try to stay cool and try to stay collected. And it's much easier than, or it's much more difficult than it sounds. But I think it's one of those things that a lot of people struggle with early on, especially when getting into entrepreneurship and getting into the depths of owning a business and growing a company, when you're facing really troubling choices and challenges. It can be tough to navigate those situations, but always trying to maintain that composure, and look at every situation, and trying to be as cool as possible is definitely something that I've learned, that I can always get better at, but is something that I can already see improvement in from those early days. So I would say, those are the burdens that come with being a leader sometimes, is making those tough situations and having those tough emotions. But at the end of the day, you can always grow and better yourself from those scenarios. And that's something that, I can hope to continue to learn about myself. Yeah.
I would say for me, I always thought I was good at communicating just because I could talk, but you learn that there's different communication styles and different ways that you can communicate as a leader, to whether it's your team, whether it's vendors, whether it's customers. There's just different ways of communicating to people. And sometimes the way you feel might be the best way to communicate. Or even going back to the cultural perspective, you have to be aware of some of these, especially when you're leading different people in different cultures and different parts of the world. So the communication styles might be different, and that's something you just have to be aware of. For me, I would say, I always thought I was a good communicator, but in years into business, I've learned more and more that there are several ways to improve your communication, especially as a leader. And so that's one big aspect for me that I've learned a lot about myself years into my business, is I can always communicate better. And I'm learning every week how to communicate better, at least better than I previously did. So that's one area for me.
That's especially true when you're international. there can be you can say something and have so many meanings all at once. So that's very right. Thank you for that. I think we have time for one more question. If anybody wants to ask one more question. Oh, go ahead.
What's some advice that you can give to young students like us in terms of business or growing ourselves, like anything like that? Just some general advice that we could use.
What a great question to end this segment. How about I start with our virtual team here? Shalom, Alina, you want to take that on?
Sure. So I would say, there's so much great advice to be given, just out of the few years that I've been in business. But I would say the main things, just for growing as an entrepreneur and growing as a person, as a student myself, I found that asking questions is key. Asking questions and staying curious. Oftentimes, as people become adults and, kind of age out of college and any sort of school environment, they stop asking questions because they're afraid to, look unintelligent or inexperienced. And they don't want to look like they don't know what they're doing. And I think that it's absolutely a downfall of society when people stop asking questions and they stop being curious. And that's definitely a crucial part of just growing as an individual. Outside of business, outside of entrepreneurship, growing as an individual requires asking questions and always having that yearning for knowledge, and that curiosity and that tenacity. And I would say that's definitely the best piece of advice I could give, is continue to ask questions. Aside from that, there's a saying that my parents always told me that I like to pass on and share, because it's one of those short, sweet little sayings that sticks with you for sure. And it's work hard, try, believe, and never give up. And when you break that down, it's simple, but it has a lot of meaning. And it really encapsulates the importance of believing in yourself, believing in those around you, and working hard, despite hardships and challenges, just working to overcome and be tenacious, and just, ask questions. That's what I'd say.
All right. So for me, I'll give you two answers, the short version and the long version. So I was born and raised in northern Nigeria, and I remember going to boarding school. I went to boarding school since first grade, and this has always stuck with me. It was something that I learned in the first grade in northern Nigeria by a teacher, and it was simple. He almost made it a song. He just said, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And he would almost sing it, right? That's never left me since first grade, since I was 6, in anything I do. So that would be kind of my first piece of advice. Second, I have these 6 principles that I often share. And literally, I've been using these 6 principles since I was in college. And they're just, I guess, principles or theories, whatever you want to call them. But there's 3 Ds and there's 3 Ps. The 3 Ds are discipline, dedication, discernment. And the 3 Ps are passion, purpose, and persistence. And I literally have these on shirts and hats, and they're just principles that I used to become a professional soccer player, to jump into this business. I live by them on a daily basis, and those are kind of like my 6 daily commandments that I look at. So I would say those 6, and the other is just, if at first you don't succeed, try again. Or in another way, you fall 7 times, you get up 8. Those are some of my principles on really paving your path into success.
Hey, Shalom, I wouldn't mind buying one of those shirts if you have an extra one.
Not a problem.
I guess there are two main elements. The first one is take advantage of all the opportunities that are given you, both volunteer or within work. A lot of people will look at tasks that are given to you and it's like, hey, you know what, this is kind of menial. I remember when I started at Honeywell, one of my mentors had me help him as a co-chair for a seminar. And he had me read all of the submittals, and then I had to grade them, and then I had to give him a review. And I was like, God, why am I doing all this work for you? But he was teaching me a valuable lesson. As part of that, I learned the process of on these conferences, how is it run? And then eventually I was chairing this conference. And so just learn, do as best you can with the tasks that are given and take it as a learning opportunity. No matter what you're assigned, you're bound to find some aspect or something that you'll learn. The other one is find a good mentor. Even now I have mentors that I go to. CEOs don't know it all. I'll be honest about it. We sometimes try to project that we do, but get a mentor. It's been valuable my entire career. I've always had someone that would give me the opportunity that believed in me that I could talk to and I could trust. And then the other one is pay attention to your network. The reason that I'm in the place that I am is because I've got a strong network. And you never know where people are going to be. Some of the people that I started my career with are now running businesses. Some of my colleagues, I owe all of the success at all of the companies to having a strong team underneath me. So pay attention to your network, make sure you engage with them as people, find a mentor, and then take advantage of every opportunity.
You know, mentorship, there's something to be said about that. One of my mentors did exactly the same thing to me. And now I believe she's still on the call listening to us, and another one's sitting here in the room with us. So there's a lot to be said about mentorship, not to take anything away from it.
I think you all have given great advice. I agree with Alina about being curious. I think that, people who think they have nothing else to learn, they're really not going to succeed very far. And another one, I don't remember who said it, but basically never trust anybody who says they've never failed. If a person tells you they've never failed, it means they've never tried. So I think being open to failure and being open to try a plan B or a plan C is really important, because sometimes that first path that you think about, that plan A, doesn't work out. And there's a lot of ways to get there. So, just be open to different opportunities that might take you on a zigzag, might not seem right, but ultimately they get you to where you want to be. And that would be probably my my main advice.
What a great way to end this segment, though. Thank you. Thank you for the great advice, everyone. And it's so great and refreshing to hear from you guys how no matter what you've done, you've struggled and you managed to continue. And like Shalom said, get up again, get up that 8th time and continue. I'll hand it over to you, co-moderator.
So to close off the session, we'd like to give out a couple of thank yous. I want to thank all the students that were able to make it here today, as well as our wonderful speakers. So can we get some claps around the room for our wonderful speakers? We'd also like to thank Ghazal Khorshidi. So she helped a lot. She's part of the Thunderbird team to make this event happen. As well as Dr. Hagram and Thunderbird for allowing us to hold this event. Further, we'd like to thank my wonderful co-moderator, Susana, for really being the light in this entire process. She's amazing. And we'd like to thank the Mandela Washington Fellowship at ASU for coming out to this event, especially Hector Zelia, I believe, and Hank Marshall. And I like to thank, of course, the interns, Denish, for helping me so much with the tech stuff. That was a process. So as well as
I've done it without you.
yeah, we couldn't have. Alicia for being a great help, allowing people in the building. Alexandra for being here. Harshita for coming as well. So yeah, and of course, thank you to Doug for allowing us to put this together with all these amazing speakers.
Well, thank you, Doug. Is there something else you'd like to say? But okay, before we conclude the session.
Well, I think that's it.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. If you're joining us virtually, thank you for being here. Of course, here in the room, thank you as well. I believe the speakers may have some time afterwards if you'd like to approach them. Okay, at the pub. Sorry, that's, hey, I'm with you on that. So sorry, virtual friends, but
It's open till 7,
okay.
and so some of us are going up, so if you'd like to come up to the front, please.
Thank you.
Everybody virtually, thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
An event end without. I know.